Hello again. We're wrapping up our Kedro course, and in the following videos we're going to give you a few hints on how you can keep exploring the Kedro project and the Kedro community. Speaking of which, we want to start by encouraging you to join the Kedro community. We have a very active Slack workspace, and you can see here the announcement that we did of the latest stable release at the time of recording, which was 0.18.13, and there's a lot of interesting channels that you can check, in particular the questions channels, which are very active, and you can use them to connect with the rest of the community, ask any questions you might have, and try to see if you can solve your problems quickly. This requires a Slack account, but if you want to just browse what we're discussing without necessarily joining, you can do so at linen-slack.kedro.org, and this will take you to an online interface that indexes all the content. So for example, you can see here quick search and locate any topic that might be interesting for you. If you want to join our Slack workspace, then go to slack.kedro.org and you will be immediately redirected to the Slack application. Another thing that will be very useful for you will be to learn some software engineering principles. Kedro is based on applying good software engineering principles to your data science code, and we will try to embody those principles using the project structure and encouraging you to write nodes as Python functions and so on. And the more you understand about these underlying principles, the better your code will be, and the easier it will be for you to write maintainable data science pipelines. For example, this is the curriculum of Software Engineering Principles for Data Scientists course that we're teaching internally. You will do good in understanding things like why is software engineering necessary for data science in the first place, how to write Python functions that are pure and follow the single responsibility principles, and so on, how to refactor Jupyter notebooks, how to manage dependencies and work with virtual environments. We've been doing this during the course, and there's much more that you can learn. How to improve code maintainability and reproducibility using configuration. Again, Kedro configuration makes it easy for you, and you can continue using that. How to use Git and GitHub to keep track of your code and your history. This is super important so that you can go back in time, see when you changed something and why, and so on. And finally, get familiar with your IDE and try to extract as much power from it as possible. In this course, we've been using VS Code, but there are other IDEs that you might want to use, and any of them will be good as long as you spend enough time to get familiar with it and use all its capabilities. On the other hand, what happens if you don't want to use all of Kedro? We've seen that Kedro gives you a very well-integrated environment with the project template, the catalog, the configuration loader, and so on. But maybe you want to start simple and introduce some of the Kedro abstractions and leave some of the others aside. It turns out that with the most recent releases, this is as easy as ever. For example, say that you just want to use Kedro for data processing, and you don't want to use either the structure or even the configuration loader. In this documentation page, you have some instructions on how to do that. For example, you can define your catalog.yaml with the datasets that you need, and you don't even need to save it into a conf/base with a conf/local and so on. It can be right there next to your script or notebook. And then after you have that, you can load that catalog.yaml with any YAML library, for example, PyYAML, and then you can load the contents and use the data catalog from config to create a data catalog object that allows you to load these datasets. Then you see that you can call the catalog.load with the dataset name, and it's going to give you a pandas dataset or any other file type that you specified. So using Kedro without opting for the full extent of its capabilities is now possible, and this allows you to get gradually into the Kedro way of doing things. We have already seen in previous videos how you can use the Omega config loader the config loader that comes by default with Kedro, to do all sorts of interesting things. And there are some more advanced functionalities that you might want to look into. For example, you can use global variables. In this case, we're defining some globals.yml that contains some variables that I'm going to reuse in other places. And then I can use this special syntax with $ braces to interpolate some of those variables and use them wherever I want. This can be in parameters or in catalog files or any other configuration file. This functionality is possible thanks to a concept that comes from OmegaConf, which is the concept of resolvers. And we were using the globals resolver, but you can define your own. These resolvers transform some strings that are in the YAML file and then turn it into a Python object that you like. For example, let's say that you want to perform some operation with some values directly from the catalog. In this case, you could define an entry like this. Again, using $ and braces, you are adding this special syntax. And let's say that you want to add the numbers 1, 2, and 3. Then you can define this resolver called add, and then by adding that to the config loader arguments, you can directly use it without any problem. The way to define that is by adding this dictionary key, which is add, and then defining a function that is going to transform the text input into some output. In this case, adding some numbers. And you can go beyond that. For example, you can get today's date, or you can do any other Python operation that you like. So this is a very interesting way of combining the simplicity of YAML files with the dynamic capabilities of Python, all thanks to the Omega config loader. Another interesting thing that you might want to try is extending Kedro through hooks and plugins. Kedro uses a plugin tool called Pluggy, which is very popular because it's the one that powers the PyTest ecosystem, to give you points in which you can extend the functionality of Kedro. This is a list of hooks that are available. For example, you can extend the Kedro's functionality after the catalog is created, or right before a node is run, right after a node is run, and so on and so forth. This can be useful in case you want to, for example, connect Kedro with an existing tool, or add some extra reporting, like how much time does it take to run a node, or how much memory does it use, and many other use cases. This is how that looks in practice. In the end, you would be defining a Python class with a method that is named in the same way as the hook that you want to use. For example, if you want to extend the functionality after catalog created, then you would define a method like that. You add a special decorator that comes from Pluggy, which is hook spec, and then you decide what do you want to do. In this example from the documentation, we're just adding some extra logging, listing what are the catalog entries at that point, but you can do whatever you want. And this is just one way in which you can extend Kedro. But there is already a rich ecosystem of plugins that you might want to try. I really encourage you to have a look. For example, I work at Quantum Black, AI by McKinsey, which is one of the members of the Kedro Technical Steering Committee. But there are other companies and entities that make part of our community, and they also create their own plugins. For example, Getting Data, a Polish consultancy, creates a number of plugins that you can use to deploy Kedro to different targets. For example, Kedro Kubeflow, Kedro HRML, Kedro Airflow on Kubernetes, and so on. Another member of the Kedro TSC creates Kedro MLflow, among other plugins. Kedro MLflow is possibly one of the most widely used Kedro plugins, and it does what the name implies. It allows you to connect Kedro to run your pipelines with MLflow to perform experiment tracking, use it as a model registry, and so on. And it doesn't end here. There's a long list of plugins maintained by the community. Some of them are more active, some of them are more experimental, and we have listed a few of them on our documentation. And you can add your own very easily. And in case you want to contribute to Kedro, there are at least two big ways of doing it. One of them is contributing to the Kedro project directly, so interacting with the Kedro repositories that are official under the Kedro org. So the Kedro framework, Kedro Viz, Kedro plugins, and so on. And you're not limited to contributing code. Of course, we will appreciate if you report any bugs that you can find, but you can go much further. You can help us understand whether a given issue is a bug or not, and you can even contribute a pull request. In the Kedro wiki that I'm showcasing right now, we have some instructions on how you can contribute to each area of the project. Finally, you can also send documentation fixes, for example. These can go anywhere from a small typo on some paragraph to a bigger contribution on how to connect Kedro with some existing tool. And finally, if you're contributing to Kedro without necessarily pushing code or helping us on the official repositories, for example, by writing a blog post on your own blog, or creating a plugin, or just showcasing how you used Kedro for specific projects, you can send your contribution to the awesome Kedro repository. In this, we are listing a number of contributions from the community that date from some years to the present, that include blog posts, awards that we've won, companies using Kedro, example projects, videos, and so on. So if you want to make a contribution to Kedro, whether it's helping us directly or just spreading the word, let us know and we will be more than happy to welcome you to our community contributors. And that's the end of the course, at least for now. We've come a long way. We started from a very bare-bones Kedro project, we added our first datasets to the catalog, and then we started creating our first pipelines and so on. Later on, we explored some of the more advanced features of Kedro, such as modular pipelines or dataset factories and so on. And finally, we saw how you can deploy a Kedro project as a Python package, as a Docker image, or even as an Airflow DAG. Now, there's a lot more things that you can learn, but this is a good starting point, and I'm sure that thanks to this, you will be shipping data pipelines to production in no time. Stay tuned in our YouTube channel for more videos like this, longer and shorter, community updates, and hopefully more interesting content for you. And see you very soon.